Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Aarna, host of Aarna's News, where on this podcast channel, I aim to eliminate the gender gap in the STEM fields by featuring inspiring female professionals and highlighting their stories and accomplishments to further encourage girls. Today on episode 74.
I would say I learned that, as I grew, right, as I got older. I think when I first went to work in the shipyard, actually, I think I was just really naive. It was literally, I didn't exaggerate that. It was literally me and 200 boys. And perhaps my parents had an awareness of what I was undertaking, but I think I was oblivious and I was just naive. And so it really was like, wow, what on earth have I done? I mean, I really stood out like a sore thumb. And it really, at times, it was challenging, but it really did get me to learn to stand on my own 2 feet and to not be too concerned about standing out.
Today on episode 74, I am pleased to announce our guest, Phelan. On her first day of work as a 16-year-old engineering apprentice at a Royal Navy submarine base in Scotland, Anne met the 200 boys who had formed that year's engineering class with her. The phrase baptism of fire springs to mind, but it opened her eyes to the challenges of the workplace, learning what it takes to succeed, keeping her eyes on the prize, the need for adaptability, and an acceptance of change. These valuable lessons continue to serve Anne well on her career journey from government shipyard worker to senior international executive. Today, Anne is the founder and CEO of Merit Davies International, an executive coaching practice focused on helping senior businesswomen learn to successfully navigate business and life challenges, achieve their career goals, and have the life they desire. Anne brings a wealth of international, multifunctional, cross-business experience to her clients through her coaching, and she's delighted to be able to share some of her experiences with us today. So thank you so much, Anne, for being here today. Before we dive into the questions, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, thanks. I'm absolutely delighted to be here with you today, Aarna. I was just really impressed when you actually reached out to me to just learn what it is that you're doing at such a young age. I think it's absolutely tremendous. And I couldn't be more delighted and honored to be here today. So, as you mentioned, I run my own coaching company now after many years in the corporate world. And I've tended to focus really in the same areas as you, which I guess is how we connected, right? It's about those STEM dominant industries that have traditionally been male dominated. It's super interesting work. I absolutely love what I do. And it really is, I think, a real privilege to be able to support women in the way that I do as a coach and a mentor. And I know we'll get into some kind of deeper questions where I can tell you a little bit more about my background, but I think that will probably suffice for now.
All right. So my first question for you is, tell us a bit about your career path.
Given I'm significantly older than you are. But it's really, I guess it's in 3 distinct phases. That first phase was when I left high school. I wasn't particularly interested in going to college at that time. And so I started work as an indentured electrical technician apprentice with a Royal Navy shipyard in Scotland, in the UK. And I did that for 4 years. And then as I was doing that, we did have to go to, I guess you'd call it here in America, like community college. I still had to study, which was a big surprise to me because I thought when I left school, I was done with study. But actually, I really enjoyed the study. And I decided that if I really did want to move forward with the career to the extent that I wanted to, that I really ought to go to college and get a degree. So off I went. I have a degree in engineering. And when I was looking for a job at the end of that, I actually moved into the corporate world. I left government work behind, and I went to work for an energy company. I was there for more than a couple of decades, actually, and I worked in a wide variety of areas in operations, in oil refining. One of the jobs I loved the most was in tanker chartering, ship tankers, chartering those to move oil around. And for most of those 20 years, I was actually in a leadership position. So that, again, added a different level to the work that I was doing. And a lot of it involved transformation and change. And so when I decided to do something different again and leave the corporate world, that's really what got me into the world of coaching and mentoring, and to some degree, I guess, advising. I really love the leadership role. I really love the opportunity to work with my team members, and helping them to really reach their full potential as well. And so that's the three phases. I started off in the shipyard, then I went to work in corporate, and now for 12 years, I think it is, I've been working as an executive coach.
I love that. I mean, you've had so many different career journeys and jumps. Like, you know, you started working and then you didn't know you had to go through education again. And then you did, you got your degree in engineering and then you climbed the ladder there. And now here you are doing what you love, which is, you know, at being the CEO of Merritt Davies. So I love that for you. And yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I never would have planned it like that. I mean, things change and things evolve. And yeah, I probably wouldn't have said halfway through, or even two-thirds of the way through my corporate life, that I would ever go and set up my own business and become an entrepreneur. And that in itself has opened up so many different challenges. But as I say, I absolutely love the work that I do. I always find working with other people over a period of time and seeing the changes that they can make in their own lives, it's really fulfilling. It's rewarding, and actually, in so many ways, it feels like a privilege to be able to do that. Right, to really connect with someone, and to be able to support them. And as I say, my real focus is in those STEM type situations, in those industries, very male dominated, and I think women have a particular set of challenges. Everyone has challenges, but I think in certain environments, it can be very specific, those challenges for women. So again, that's why I love the work that you're doing, Aarna. I think, trying to shift that gender equation in those industries is a great thing to do, because I really am a strong believer in women, young girls, having the opportunity to really embrace what it is that they enjoy doing, and don't feel that there's a particular path that they have to go down simply based on their gender.
Absolutely. And this is a great segue to my question, which is what advice would you give someone wanting to pursue a career similar to yours? And do you have any tips to succeed?
Yeah, this was a question that when I thought about it, I thought, wow, this is a tough one, because do you want to be a shipyard apprentice? Do you want to work in corporate? Do you want to be an executive coach? And so I think my advice would really be about following your own desire, your own passion, your own interests. I think that's a really important thing to do. As I said in my sort of intro, I didn't want to go to university or to college when I left high school. I just wanted to earn money and I wanted to learn a skill. And I did see through the work that I was doing that, okay, the college degree makes sense. Go and do that as the next thing. And although I was slightly older than others when I went to college, I was 4 years older generally, because I went after my apprenticeship. And also when I graduated and I went to work in corporate, I was a little bit older than the other new hires. But to me, that's never been a barrier. I think it's, if you are confident in what it is that you want to do, and you're very clear on what it is that you want to do, things will start to fall into place. I think the challenges come when you're really not sure.
Absolutely. Like, I feel like when you see yourself as someone who has a disadvantage, like, for example, you might think, oh, there's not that many people who look just like me, or other people might be younger. You kind of you put that on yourself, and you kind of let that weigh you down. But just knowing that, sure, there might be different disadvantages that we all have. Like, nobody is just perfect. Just know that you can overcome that, and you can do so many great things with that, because you might have more experience, you might have something else to put on the table. Just know that you shouldn't let that difference divide you from the people that you're around, or like the opportunities that might come your way.
Yeah, and I love that you say that, Arna. I think that it's a very mature perspective to take. I would say I learned that as I grew, right, as I got older. I think when I first went to work in the shipyard, actually, I think I was just really naive. It was literally, I didn't exaggerate that. It was literally me and 200 boys. And perhaps my parents had an awareness of what I was undertaking, but I think I was oblivious and I was just naive. And so it really was like, wow, what on earth have I done? I mean, I really stood out like a sore thumb. And it really at times it was challenging, but it really did get me to learn to stand on my own 2 feet and to not be too concerned about standing out. Everything it's like the yin and the yang. Anything that feels like a real challenge, a real weight, a negative, if you actually look, it is bound to have an opposite. Everything has an equal and opposite. So what are the advantages? And so if you're the only one, then you're going to stand out, right? You have an opportunity, in a way, you have a platform that if you look like everybody else, you would not have. People should think about, things aren't going well. Okay, this thing is going on, this situation exists. What would the absolute opposite of that look like? Right? It must exist. And so if you go looking for that, things will start to turn out much more positively.
That is true. And honestly, like if you're in a crowd and you blend in with others and you purposely want to do that, how are you supposed to progress just by yourself? Because everyone would want to progress together. Like, you would just be progressing with like the other 200 people, but instead you let your differences give you a platform and you were able to build upon that and advocate for yourself. So you're basically here where you are today because of the choices you made based on what you had with you at that time.
Yeah. And again, I think the word that you use there, the choice, or 2 words, right? The choice, that's so critical in everything. We all have a choice, even in scenarios where we feel that we're a victim or we're kind of backed into a corner. We always have a choice, even if the only choice we have is the attitude that we're going to bring to the situation. We can't change the situation, we can't change the circumstance, but no one can ever force you to think a certain way, right? You always have a choice around that. And so, again, I think that's really important. Always make conscious choices about how you want to move forward.
Absolutely. And my question for you is, what is a common myth about your profession that you want to debunk?
Yeah, and again, it was because of doing these different things. It was a common myth about chartering, coaching, or there's so many different roles I've had. But again, I think it's really reinforcing what we've already spoken about, which is that almost like a broader myth that there are certain ways to forge a career path, or there are certain ways to live your life. And so often when I work with women in business, it's as if the roadmap is, okay, I'm going to graduate high school and then I'll get my college degree and then I'm going to start my career. Maybe I'm going to find a partner, get married, I might have children. Then I'm trying to manage work and home, and then I'm getting exhausted and getting lost. It's really, at that point, when you're juggling all of those things, it's as if the roadmap ran out. There is no roadmap after that. And so, again, I think that forget the roadmap, forget what you think people expect you to do. Decide yourself what it is that you would love to do, and then go and pursue that. So if there was a common myth, it is that there's a certain path to do certain things. I think in today's world, more and more, that is absolutely not the case. There's so many opportunities. Things are changing so quickly. Technology is changing so quickly that for young people, it's incredible. You can jump from career to career. You can jump from company to company. Unlike when I started, you might expect to spend your entire career with one organization. If you did that today, they'd be like, people would be looking, oh, like, what's wrong with this person? Why have they never moved? It's more like, 2, 3, 5 years in a role in a company, and then you're looking for something else. So there is no cookie cutter approach. So that would be my thought on, what would be a common myth. There is not only one way to do something.
Yeah, there's not like a one size fits all type of equation, like, oh, if you do this for X number of years, you'll be happy, you'll live life fully, and you'll get a lot of money. Especially with a lot of technology today, and with this year with AI and ChatGPT, especially, like people are using these resources for the better. And a lot of companies are changing the ways that they do things. So it's really not the same thing as what happened before, like years ago. So just know that you probably shouldn't be doing things the same as other people because everyone has their own journey. And if you do, that's okay. But just know that it's not the end of the world if you do something differently than your neighbor, because just know that it's not a cookie cutter approach.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd reinforce that 100%. I think you're absolutely spot on. More, I think, today than at any other time in the past, you can be, do, or have anything that you want. You just have to determine what it is that you want. And so often, in my experience, people don't, they literally do not determine what it is that they want. They follow, as I say, that almost like societal roadmap. But if you actually stop and think, what is it that I really, really want? I don't think many people actually do that. And actually, a lot of people, as they get older, find it incredibly difficult to define what it is they really, really want, because at that point, they start to think about, well, I can't have this for this reason, or I've got this responsibility, so I can't do that. And they constrain themselves tremendously instead of just having a blank piece of paper and saying, yeah, if I could be, do, or have anything, what would my life look like? And then moving forward on that basis. And it doesn't mean that everything's going to suddenly come to you because you've won the lottery. But if you've got some clarity around key elements of your life, whether it's relationships or health or career or finances, something that in effect, what you're doing is you're creating your own roadmap. I think that's when you live a really fulfilled life.
Absolutely. And my question for you is, if you could step into my shoes, what would you have asked yourself that I didn't?
Okay, so I think this is a question, is around challenges. Really, what have been my toughest challenges in my career? And we probably touched on some of them, right? So as I said, I'm an engineer, so therefore I love structure, I love process. So when there's huge ambiguity or a lack of clarity, or particularly a lack of structure or a lack of adherence to process, I have to say, when there is a process and people don't follow it, it kind of drives me crazy. So I find that to be a challenge. And of course, when you're in the working environment, you are working with a massive cross section of people, and people do things in different ways, and people don't always follow process. And so that for me, with that sort of more process structural oriented mind, that has been a challenge. But in a way, what that has shown me through life is you have to accept ambiguity. You have to accept that things are not static. They're very fluid. They're going to be changing all the time. And so, I would say that question, and what's been some of your biggest challenges, I would say that was it. And yet on the other side of the question of challenge is, what have been some of your great successes? And that's a question I always ask my clients. And what's so interesting is it's so easy for people to talk about challenges and things that they find really hard. And if I say, okay, give me a list of your top 10 successes to date in your life, it could be anything, not just work. I think I've only ever had one client come up with 10 things, right? People really, really struggle to think about successes. And I think it's really important to recognize that. And again, for your listeners, it's to not just think about the struggles, the challenges, the things that you're not particularly good at, your weaknesses perhaps, but what are you naturally skilled at? And what are your wins that you achieve every single day? It's really important to do that, because when you're in a constant growth phase, as someone like yourself, Aarna, right? You're just in this early part of your life, and you're studying and you're doing all sorts of new things, and you're learning and growing all the time. It's it's not always going to be smooth sailing. Things aren't always going to go well, but it's really important to get into that habit really at a very young age, to remind yourself every single day, what went well today, what were my wins today, what was maybe a bold action that I took today, to really build up that inner confidence, that self-belief that will really stand you in good.
100% agreed. With what you said before, like of the ambiguity part, I can definitely add on to that as a student myself. Like during online learning, all the projects that I had to do on like, Zoom and everything was solo, so I knew what I was able to do, my constraints, like the problems I had, and I was able to figure it out myself. But going back to school, I thought to focus on what other people need, like the other people's needs, and it was really hard to figure out why other people weren't working the same way I was. And I was like, okay, if you can't do this thing, then can you tell me? Like, I needed answers to the questions I had. And it was a lot to take in because other people don't work the same way I do. I'm always very like stubborn. I need the answers now. And if things don't go that way, then I'm gonna get a little bit funky. Um, but just learning to adapt to different situations and knowing that it's okay if there's the unknown there, it's okay if there's ambiguity, because in the end, you'll be able to finish your project, you'll be able to get to where you are. But just knowing that it's not a cookie cutter approach, everyone has different approaches to what they do. Like for me as a student, it was really hard to like talk to people to communicate about my issues because I thought everyone worked the same way I did, especially during online learning. But that really wasn't the case. And for your second part of like what I did well today, I think that's something very important because a lot of people think that we all focus on the bad things that happen. Like as a student myself, I think about, oh my gosh, I could have studied harder for this. I forgot this one question to the test. But just knowing and focusing on the positive things can make you more likely to be happier in the moment and focus more on the present instead of in the future or in the past, and really allows you to live in the moment. And that's just what you should focus on.
Yeah, again, I agree 100%. I mentioned it earlier that nobody can choose your attitude for you, right? Only you can choose your attitude. And it's almost like having a conversation with yourself on a fairly regular basis. So when you're getting frustrated with other people not working in the same way that you do, and I think we all do that as human beings, right? Is to actually question yourself. Well, what is it about their approach that I'm finding annoying? And why am I finding that annoying? And perhaps what other kind of attitude could I adopt that made me feel more relaxed? Because what I think we forget is that when we have this frustration or irritation or resentment or things like that going on in our own head, it's actually just going on in our head. It's not affecting, it's not going on in other people's heads necessarily. Our mood might affect them, of course, but we have the power to choose our mood. We have the power to choose how we're thinking. And again, it's because we tend to work on autopilot. We don't often stop and think, okay, well, okay, how could I change? How could I do something differently? What could I potentially learn from that person? It's a hard thing to do, especially when you're absolutely convinced, of course, that you're right. But I think it's something that is worth practicing. Is questioning
Absolutely.
yourself when you're finding yourself very frustrated, very irritated. Okay, what could I do differently? How could I hear this person differently? It sounds a bit sort of rose-colored spectacles perhaps to work that way, but I do think that on the times when you can do that, it allows you to have a better day,
Yeah.
right? That's what it's all about.
And it also lets you learn more about yourself because during online learning in like middle school, I had like this approach where I had to finish this by this due date. And if it wasn't there, then I had to like cram in. I had to make sure I got it in. And when I saw my friends doing things and like group projects like in person after COVID, I was like, wow, that's a different approach. So I learned a lot of things by focusing on what I could do better or how I can manage the situation more effectively in my thoughts. So just learning to introspect a couple of times when you're like actually doing the job can be really helpful on like the best approaches.
Oh, for sure. It's really making me think about someone when I was in corporate who I worked with very closely. And she and I just looked at things completely differently, like 180 degrees apart. And I would get so mad and think, oh my gosh, I mean, why can she not see it this particular way? And she was very calm, very relaxed. And it eventually sunk into my mind that, you know what, I should really use her almost like a partner. That I have a perspective on a challenge and I'm not getting anywhere with it. I'm going to ask her what she would do. And she would come at it from a very, very different approach. And as soon as I'd made that switch in my own mind to not get irritated, but actually to kind of use her as a thinking partner, as a resource, as somebody that could really help me. Our relationship changed completely. And I got so much benefit from it by just making that switch. In a way, almost instead of trying to fight the challenge, right? To fight the situation, instead of having that negative energy, switching it completely and bringing an openness to collaborate and a positive energy, and the benefit was enormous. So again, sometimes it's really hard to think like that when you get yourself in more of a negative mood. But if you can switch, if you can catch yourself thinking like that and stop and go the other way, it pays off tremendously.
Yeah, sometimes we're just like really immersed in our thoughts and we need someone else to just give us a little tap on our shoulder and zoom out of like the small picture and see the big picture. And that's what happened to you, your partner was like had a completely different approach on everything, and though you were frustrated, you finally decided to, understand their thinking and accept that, and you were able to like fundamentally alter the way you thought and approach problems with someone else's perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, it's amazing. It's all about those choices that you make in your head. But you have to, in a way, have that conversation with yourself to recognize, oh, I'm off down that path again, that habitual path I go down. How about trying a different approach and just being open to different things? I think it just opens up the world to you in a very different way. And if you actually start to observe people and their habits of thought and their habitual approach to things, again, it's really fascinating. Human behavior, I find, is just the most fascinating thing. I love it.
Absolutely. And my question for you is, what are the best resources slash books that have helped you find your career path?
Again, there've been so many different things in so many different areas. But I thought I'd suggest some books that are really more, they're pertinent to everyone, but I've really come across them in this latest phase as the executive coach. And so one you've probably heard of, it's a very old book, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. It's one of the classic self-help books. If you read it now, the language seems very old-fashioned because it was written, I guess, in the 1930s, something like that. But it's timeless because so much of what he talks about in the book is applicable now as it was, almost 100 years ago. And it's really all about success principles. What are the things that very successful people do in order to arrive at that point, right? To build a success and sustain it. And clearly there are thousands of books written about how to be successful, but I think this one is an easy read. And as I say, it's a timeless classic. So that's one. There's another book that depends on who your listeners are as to whether or not people would be interested in this. This is, I think, one of the best books I have ever read, and it's called The Choice by Edith Eva Eger, who is, I think she's about 96 years old now. It's quite remarkable. She only wrote this book when she was about 90. The most incredible life. So if you want a Holocaust survivor, a psychologist, came to America, an American citizen. She only went to college, I think, when she was in her 50s. But her whole book is around the choices that you make and how she has learned through intense trauma and through the phases in her life, why making a choice at any given moment is the most critical thing that you can do. So it's a fascinating read. It's The Choice. And then my third choice is a very recent book. It was only published in the summer. It's called My Father Knew the Secret by Brian Proctor. And it's a really good read. If people want something that's much more lighthearted, perhaps, than the first two books that I mentioned, this one would be good to pick up. You can get it on Amazon. It's called My Father Knew the Secret by Brian Proctor, and it's really a part memoir, a part, again, self-help book. It has lots of good insights into things that people can do to improve their lives. And the reason for the title is that Brian's father was a gentleman called Bob Proctor, who actually featured in the movie The Secret, if anyone's ever seen that. But anyway, those would be my three choices. I'm an avid reader. I could have sat here for an hour and given you more choices on books, but I think those would just be a good selection.
I love that. I'm gonna definitely check them out. I think those books are really interesting, especially like the last one. I'm gonna definitely check it out because it's like a memoir. But I think all the books you said are really interesting, and I'm definitely gonna add them to my list of reading.
Great.
And my last question before we end the call is, what do you think is the vital factor that shaped your career? What was your life before learning it, and what was your life after learning it?
So we've talked about this a lot. I would say the vital factor is making intentional choices, right? Being very aware of what it is that you want to do and being very intentional or very conscious about the choice that you make, and then go after it. I think that's always been a part of my life, and when I'm not clear, that's really when I get lost, when I don't really feel fulfilled. So I think that's the vital factor. And as I say, before I really understood that, uh, I probably went down some paths that weren't necessarily the right choice. But once I became clear, and probably, as I got older and had more confidence to make the choices that I wanted to make, then things just fall into place. I remember when I was first in the corporate world, and I mentioned to my boss at the time that I wanted to become an oil tanker charterer. I wanted to hire oil tankers. And he said to me, "Oh, well, you can't do that, Anne. We don't have any women doing that." And that's when I was on a secondment to an oil refinery at the time, and I think I had another 4 months to go. And he was coming to ask me, "Okay, what do you want to do next?" And that's what I said. That's what I want to do. And he said, "No, I don't think that's going to be possible." But sure enough, 4 months later, that's exactly what I did. And so again, it's about once you know what you want, you just have to tell people, and you have to go after it and be clear on your choices.
Absolutely. Like for you, you were in a cohort of 200 other boys, and you could have let that kind of sink in, and you could have just blended in with them and let that difference let you, just oppress you and not do the things that you wanted to do. And even so, you told, your boss things that you wanted to do. You wanted to like hire other people, and they were like, no, I don't think other girls should be there. It's only for guys. If you let that like define you at that moment, I don't think you would be here today, because those choices basically define the path that you laid out. You yourself wanted to find things that propelled you through your career journey, and you let that happen instead of letting things fall to your side and blame it on them and be part of like societal norms. You kind of chased after what you loved, and that is something that I think everyone should implement, because a lot of people who are naysayers will think that your choices and your dreams are not valid. But if you let them define you, then you will basically become that norm, a representation of that norm. But if you chase after the things that you love, then you'll eventually end up to where you want to be.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself, Aarna. I think that, yeah, go after what you want and don't let people tell you can't do it. There will always be people that will tell you that you can't do it, and they will tell you that for their own reasons. Don't listen. If you really have a passion for something, you really have a strong desire for something, never stop. Always go after it, no matter how hard it is. And you'll come against challenges and roadblocks, and people won't want to help you. But if you keep going at it, you'll find people that will help you, and you'll get the right support around you, and you will be able to achieve what you want. People are amazed actually when they start doing this, just how much they can achieve, just what they're capable of. I think most people tend to be working at certainly not at full capacity, right? And given you only get one life to live, you might as well go at it and get the most out of it that you possibly can.
Absolutely. Like, be able to chase your dreams. Don't let the naysayers get to you. If you really love something, chase after it and run for it. Get what you want, because in the end, you will be able to get to where you are today, not those naysayers and the societal norms.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Anne, for being on this call with me. I absolutely love talking to you. Before we end off, do you have any last words to the audience?
Well, I would just say thank you, Arna. I mean, it's always wonderful to have an opportunity like this, and to have the conversation with you at the age that you're at and the influence that you're having. I just take my hat off to you. I think it's absolutely tremendous. I wished I'd had this level of, get up and go and confidence when I was your age. So thank you. Thank you for having me here as a guest. I've really enjoyed it. And I've learned a lot from your different podcasts and different guests that you've had. So keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much, and I hope you have the best rest of your day.
Thank you.
And here are my 3 cents on this episode with Anne. 1. Embracing individuality and standing out. recognizing the value of embracing your uniqueness and individuality, while learning that it's okay to stand out from societal norms and expectations, gaining insights on how embracing your authenticity can lead to personal growth and fulfillment. 2. Alternative paths in education. Exploring the idea that education is not limited to traditional paths or timelines, understanding the benefits of going back to education or pursuing unconventional educational paths, while recognizing that lifelong learning is a continuous and adaptive process and there is no one-size-fits-all approach to education. And 3, living outside the norm and embracing differences. Acknowledging the importance of breaking away from societal expectations to live a more fulfilling life, and understanding that it's okay to take unconventional routes in various aspects of life, including career choices, relationships, and personal goals, and exploring the concept of living a little, taking risks, and finding joy in being different from the mainstream. Thus, that concludes the episode for this week. If you want to know more about how I relate to these amazing topics, then stay tuned for upcoming episodes. A free way to support this show is by leaving it a 5-star rating and a review on the player you are listening to. Let me know what you enjoy about this podcast, as it's a chance to tell me what you love about the show, and it helps others discover it too. Once again, thank you for finding me, and I hope we stay in touch with each other. Dito, you're listening to Aarna Sahu, the host of Aarna's News. Toodles!